I went to Jared. No, not the jewelry store. I'm not getting married. I went to the human Jared. Last week, I had the amazing opportunity to participate in a press style event and sit down with Neverwinter Systems Encyclopedia Jared, or No Worries, as a lot of you might know him, and I asked him a ton of questions about the game. I brought up a lot of the community's biggest concerns as well as some of my own personal curiosities. We talked for about an hour, and there was a lot of good information and good discussion in there, so this is quite a long video. The questions are not in any particular order because, come on, it's me we're talking about here. I've added some insight to some of my questions and my thoughts on some of Jared's responses, so this is not entirely just a recorded conversation. I've added my own narration to parts of it. There is some information that I think you'll like, and there's some that I know you won't like, but I've included all of it because it's all important information and I think it's valuable for all of us to know. I hope you all enjoy this video and I hope you gain something from it. So without further ado, let's begin. Oh, and I forgot to mention, there are 3 giveaway codes hidden somewhere in this video. One of them is for PC, one of them is for Xbox, and one of them is for PlayStation, so keep your eyes peeled. The first one I have here is something that I was just personally curious about, and that is, how long ago did you start working on the Bard? Like, when was the first meeting where you all sat down and were like, okay, we're gonna make a Bard now? How long ago was that?
So I mean, it's tricky. Are you just looking for the whole planning, or basically how long it took to make? Because
From the very beginning of when you started planning it, I would say.
so we actually initially planned it quite a while ago. I don't remember the exact time because it was that long ago. And we even initially started some work, but then there was some concerns about our timeline and some other stuff that we need to put resource towards, so we
Mm-hmm.
held off. And then COVID hit, and that changed everything for a while.
Yep.
And then we finally said, all right, we need to get back to this. And we got back to it and, went back over what we're doing and then basically got to work. And at that point, it was many months of work to get all of the power set up, all the animations to be able to play music, because that was all new for us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a long time coming because of unfortunate happenstance, but the development time itself was, I can't even be sure, but maybe, like 4 months of pure development of a systems person only dedicated to that.
That's a pretty long time. I was expecting it to be longer than that, actually, so that's kind of surprising.
Well, I think it's because the initial time we prototyped the music playing and we prototyped out some powers, and we'd actually documented the powers we wanted to make. So because of that initial start and then hold off and then start again, we had a bunch of the groundwork in place. So that
Oh, that
lowered
makes
the
sense.
time to actually develop it.
The only thing I really want to clarify with this question is that whenever Jared was saying 4 to 6 months, that's only the development time that where one person or systems people were dedicated only to that. There was more development time before that, and Bard was initially planned, I want to say probably a couple of years ago, just based on what Julia said in the stream the other day. So it's not like this was whipped up from nothing in 4 months. They had a bunch of stuff already planned before that sped up the development time a lot. So I just didn't want there to be any confusion about that. The next question is about Mythic insignias, because I'm sure you're probably aware that there's been a lot of concern about that recently. And basically my question about that is just the cost of upgrading them to Mythic is really discouraging a lot of people right now. So are there going to be more ways to obtain insignia powder to compensate for the huge price, or is there any possibility of the price changing?
So the price actually follows the formula of all the other ranks.
Mm-hmm.
So it is all the same setup. It's just that as the ranks go up, it's essentially a bit of an exponential because it's the way
Yeah,
that's factored out.
I
So it is bigger.
actually made a video
Uh,
about this 2 days ago, and I did mention that I did notice that the upgrade costs they're multiplied by 5 each time, but there's still a lot of people getting 2,500?
2,500, I think. Yeah.
That's a lot of insignia powder. So, and there's not a ton of ways that we can get that much insignia powder in a reasonable amount of time. So, is that just supposed to be something for people to work towards when they have nothing else? Or is there plans for something in the future that would make the process of getting that much insignia powder a bit easier?
It's a mix. With M21, there isn't stuff that people need an even higher item level to go do. There's,
Yeah,
it's the item, if you could do everything in M20, you can still do everything. So you don't need Mythic insignias now to like reach a new point or anything else. So it's meant to be a long-term progression. It's not meant to
right.
be, a month in and people have all Mythic. But the other thing is because we had so few ranks of insignias and because of the value of them and how that was approached in the past, people mainly saw greens and a few blues drop, and purples only came from certain sources, and legendary was mostly upgrade to get unless you bought some packs.
Right.
So what I'm looking to do in the future is expand what can drop and start with, you know, making blues certainly more common, but also making purples show up in more regular stuff, and then
Hmm.
maybe making legendaries drop more often. Saying like the now I'm trying to remember. We have so many terms for stuff. Trying to remember the premium item drop stuff. So there will be more sources for insignia powder in the future. Not, I forget. I'd have to look up if I adjusted anything initially for launch, but there will be more, and it is meant to be a long-term chase.
Okay.
So yeah, I think at first there might be some sticker shock, but then it'll get easier. And it's a similar thing happened when we released the collars. At first, people were like, "Whoa, like this is gonna
Hmm.
take a while," because people weren't thinking of who were at endgame and had everything maxed. Were like, "Well, now I want this maxed," and weren't viewing it as a over time we'll max it. And I certainly understand that point of view. So, but now I think people don't view collars as that hard, necessarily overly hard to max out, and there's stuff out there and there's ones around. So as with any new upgrade, it will start off a bit more challenging, then get easier and easier as we go.
Okay. That's definitely good to hear. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that there'll be more sources of insignia powder, or at least that it'll be a little bit easier to get them in the future. I think that will help calm people down a little bit. Because right now
Yeah,
they're like, oh my god, that's so expensive.
yeah, and I mean this one is a jump because of the setup, but we see that a lot every time we add new progression, and the goal is always not to make people nervous or make people think it's going to cost a fortune or take a ton of time, but more that there's a long progression that then continually gets easier because we want people to be able to catch up and get their stuff maxed out, and then other progression. So it's constantly things get easier and then other things show up. So
Yeah,
hopefully we can adjust it and people will start feeling pretty good.
okay, so there's one thing that I really wish I had mentioned here that I didn't think of at the time, mostly because it was the beginning of our discussion and I was still kind of nervous and my brain's all over the place. But afterwards, I was listening to this again and I was like, oh, man, I really should have said this. But from my understanding, it's not the insignia powder that is making the collars difficult to upgrade at this point. It is the lack of the greater empowerment shards. I think they're called the orange ones that you can only get from dungeons. They're still, last I checked, they were still over 100k a piece, and you need like a lot of them 50 to upgrade to legendary, and then I don't even know how many to upgrade to mythic because I've never upgraded a collar to mythic, but you need a lot of those, and that in itself is pretty expensive as well. So I really wish I had mentioned that, but it is nice to hear that there will be more ways to get insignia powder in the future. Of course, we don't know when that will be, hopefully soon, but it definitely will be nice to see more purples and maybe even orange insignias start to drop from dungeons and just insignias in general being more common. So, I would have to say the number one biggest concern that I've seen, because I did a little bit of research in the past few days, asking people in various places what their biggest concerns were about the new mod or the game in general, and definitely the number one biggest concern is that there is not any more new content in Mod 21, like no new campaign or a dungeon or anything like that. So, what do you intend players to focus on content wise after they have leveled a bard? Or is there going to be any content that we can look forward to between now and Mod 22, kind of like a midway update thing for us to do?
We are, so I can never say for sure because delays and stuff happen, but
Right.
there are plans for content and some adjustments and some new stuff coming in between M21 and M22, which will give people more stuff to do. And um, we're also starting to dig into more systematic features that give people, basically adjust content so that they can play it in different ways. So it doesn't get as tedious, but it gives them more options on what to do. We're just in the early stages of that, but because that's kind of always the thing. There are times where we need to adjust a part of the game that isn't the end game, and then
Mm,
obviously, our end game players are like, well, what are we going to do during this time? And so the
right.
more that we can develop more of these systems and features and events and stuff to make sure we're filling in that time in between adding, big new end game increases will be better. But this one at the launch definitely for an end game player seems lacking if certainly if they're not interested in the Bard. But we are working on some post module stuff as well.
Okay. That is kind of exciting. I look forward to see what that is. Does that include a dungeon? Can you tell me that?
There would not be a new dungeon between M21 and M22. No.
Darn it. Okay. Uh,
Figure instead of being cagey about that, just rip that band-aid off.
I can deal with it. I wasn't really expecting there to be one anyways, but I like dungeons, so I always have a little bit of hope that there'll be more.
Yeah, I love our dungeons too.
This discussion happened before I was aware that there was a new event leaked accidentally on the in-game calendar. So I do know that we will have that sometime in the future between now and Mod 22, and it's supposedly a milestone style event related to dragons, which is exciting to me. I don't know anything else about it because I never saw the calendar entry. All I know is from word of mouth. But hopefully there will be something else as well in addition to that, because not everyone's going to want to do the event, especially hopefully it's not as grindy as the Redeemed Citadel was, but if it is, there's going to be a lot of people who are not going to want to participate in something like that again. So I do hope that there is something else in outside of that event between now and Mod 22. So next is something that I actually noticed when I was on preview yesterday. And I was looking at the way the new queue system is set up, like the advanced dungeon queue, and then how a lot of the dungeons that were in the previous epic dungeon queue are now just in the regular dungeon queue. And the advanced dungeon queue has a lot of the, I guess, more difficult dungeons from the old epic dungeon queue in it, but the reward's still the same. And then the same thing goes for the regular dungeon queue, how all those other dungeons were added to it, that you could say are more difficult than what the dungeon queue was previously. And the rewards are still the same as they were before, and so less people, I feel like, are going to be able to successfully complete it, especially with a random group like you're supposed to approach it. So is there any possibility of the rough AD being increased for one or both of the categories?
So there should be a change on there. The epic dungeon used to be, I believe, 20,000 AD for the daily bonus, and then 3,000 for just a regular run bonus, and then obviously the VIP stuff. It should now be 30,000 for the daily, so a 50% increase, and then 4,000 for the regular. And then there was also an increase on the VIP as well. So there should be certainly more AD coming from those
Hmm,
epic dungeon queues.
maybe I just
Uh,
didn't notice.
the trial used to always be 30,000, so now the epic dungeon is on the same tier, so that could easily be why they basically both give the same now, and epic dungeon used to give less all the way
Oh,
across the
okay.
board.
Yeah, that's right.
So that that's an easy way to be like, oh, it looks the same because they're the same. But so it did get increased by quite a bit for what it was. But yeah, we wanted to make sure we had this mix in the epic dungeon queue where it was some very old dungeons from
Mm-hmm.
the early days that at the time were more difficult, and newer ones that were more mechanically difficult. And so you have this big mix between, oh, here's one that we can run through and 15 minutes and it's not challenging, and here's one that we actually find tough. And so that kind of imbalance when you're talking about people trying to get their AD can be frustrating when you get one of those hard ones, because you're like, oh, I wish I got the easy one because I want to do this fast.
Yeah, and then
So
people quit the harder ones because they
yes,
just don't want to deal with a random group who doesn't understand the mechanics or something like that.
right. And so we wanted to get better parity for that. And so that's why now it's a group that are all at least roughly similar mechanically difficult. And then that also opened up a lot more options for people who are lower and lower item level to see more content by putting more in the dungeon queue, because it scales people up and they can enter that. The other thing we did was you have the maximum AD you can get in a day from the dungeon queues. In the past, you could always only run each one once. You can still only run most of them once for the bonus, but you can run the dungeon queue as many times as you want until your bonus is full. So that was
Really?
another thing yes, that was another thing to help lower players who, don't have access to all those queues and are trying to get their AD. And so that was a change that went along with this.
I did not
And
know
just
that.
so we basically were trying to make the queues feel better, so that if you queue for the epic dungeon, now the advanced dungeon, roughly the difficulty you're getting every time. It's not going to be a big hit or miss, and that people have more options in the lower queue.
Okay. I wonder then, that brings up another question of mine. I wonder if that can be communicated in some way that you can get the bonus for the dungeon queue as many times until you reach your rough AD cap, if I understood you correctly. Because right now it's still just daily bonus for all of them, and that just makes it seem like you can only do them all one time.
Yeah, it's tricky. Like, we should certainly get the information out there outside of games so people know. In game, it's trickier because of how those windows are set up. But um, yeah, there might be something we can do to change the phrasing on that. But like, they're shared windows, so we'll have to see what we can do
Oh, okay.
on that. But we might be able to change that to basically say, I don't know, some other term for bonus to let
Bonus
people know. Yeah.
instead of daily bonus.
Yeah. But we also need a way to let people know why it ended, because if they just see bonus, all of a sudden they do hit their overall cap and they go, why'd it go away? So I
Yeah.
think there's some work all around to try to make sure everyone understands that when they look at it.
Okay, well, that's exciting. I learned something new today, and I'm happy about it.
I like surprising people.
I have a mixed opinion about surprises, but this one was a good one. So I'm actually really glad that I was wrong about this when I initially asked the question, because Jared gave a really good explanation about the changes to the dungeon queues, why they happened, and then what the changes were monetarily for us. Because I never even noticed that flew completely over my head. And if it flew over my head, I'm sure it probably flew over some of your heads too. So, although it may be more difficult to enter with a totally random group into the Epic Dungeon queue now and have a successful completion, they are all similarly mechanically difficult now. So, you're not going into it expecting or hoping for one of the shorter ones, and then you end up with a long one, and then people quit because they want to get it done as fast as possible, and they wanted Lost Mouth, and you got Castle Ravenloft or whatever. So I do like the way that it has been split up, and if you don't want to deal with the Epic Dungeon queue or you can't get into it, you can just do the regular dungeon queue as many times as you want until you reach your rough AD cap. Which is also another reason why I'm really glad I was wrong about the rewards, because I would never have known that. I never do the dungeon queue on the live server because I reached my daily cap without it. So I never even click on it. I would never know. But me being wrong about that allowed me to have a much better understanding of the new queuing system. So I'm pretty happy about that. You can see in my face that I was really surprised whenever he told me that we could do the dungeon queue as many times as we wanted now. But with my luck, I'll just get Kragma Crypts every time, because that's my least favorite dungeon, and yeah. Something that was brought up during early access was the possibility that there would be more instruments for the bard added in the future. So, is that a goal that the team is hoping to achieve soon? Obviously not before release, but in relative soonness. Or something that might come a little down the line, like the middle update between the two, or maybe even farther beyond that.
I think it would be further. There's an awful lot of work that goes into new instruments. We've looked at it. There was initially a push to see if we could have two types of instruments at launch to mix it up, but
Mm-hmm.
then looking at that and the animations and the sounds and everything attached to it, we ended up making sure we just did one so we could get it done right and get it out there in a good state. But it is something we've set up so that we can integrate more instruments, and there's been talk about what those would be and when we do it. But I
Yeah,
don't
no.
think people should expect it. I wouldn't expect it this year. So I think we would get barred out. People enjoying it, and then it will be a later thing that we say, all right, now you have. I don't even want to suggest because then people will be like, when's that instrument coming? But some other instrument.
Okay, so, but it is something that we can look forward to seeing at some point then.
Yes, we built the Bard with that in mind, so we would be able to do it, as opposed to, just doing one instrument and then later trying to figure out how to push one in there. We made sure we set it up so that it could use multiples.
Okay. Can't wait for to hear an entire band perform in the Enclave.
That would be pretty exciting.
I was really hoping that Jared would say we could expect to see the additional instruments before the end of the year, but I mean, there's a lot I don't understand about game design, so I guess it turns out that it is more difficult than I would think it is, which tends to be the case for a lot of players looking at something in the game being like, oh, that shouldn't be too hard. When in reality, none of us know anything that goes into it apart from like a very, very small percentage of people who actually have experience in game design. That was something I was really excited about since early access, whenever we were told about the desire to add more instruments, because I really want to see a band perform, man. That would be so cool. I'm not talented enough to be in a band and like play songs with people. I wish I was, but maybe I can do some research and then like record myself 5 different times playing the different instruments and then mash it all together or something. I don't know. Anyways, let's just move on now. I think you'll like. Oh wait, no, I skipped a question. Hold on, gotta go in order.
So,
Or I'll
so,
forget
so I
something.
won't like this question, but I like the next one. Is what you're saying.
Maybe. It depends on what your opinion about paladins is. If you'll like this question.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
so I've seen myself. I feel this way as well, but I've seen quite a bunch of people in my comments specifically, since I do a decent amount of healing related stuff. People have been questioning about if there's any plans to make paladin healing feel more viable, because their shield is a really great utility and it can be very strong, but then whenever it comes down to actually healing in those situations where your whole team is taking a bunch of damage, and there are other ways that you could fix that problem, of course, by like team composition and paying attention and stuff, but whenever your paladin actually needs to heal, it kind of doesn't feel very good. So, is there any plans, short term or long term, to improve the way paladin feels on the healing paragon?
So I'd say balance is always there as a plan. It's when we get time to adjust stuff, but it's complicated because, like you said, it has the shield. It's set up to work a bit different than, say, like the cleric.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and overall, if you have an entire team taking a bunch of damage, it's generally supposed to be difficult to keep them all healed because that's kind of the goal is that your whole team is never making that mistake. Like maybe a big
Right.
attack happens and you all get hit, but it's not just constant. So that's the trick of the balance is making sure that it feels good, but it's not, hey, we can do big shields and we can keep everyone healed and everything's, just great and we don't really face threats. So it's
Yeah,
it's
like it was
it's kind of
before.
yeah. So it's kind of threading that needle of finding right where that perfect balance is, which is always tricky. But I would say class balance is always on the table. It's always something we're thinking about. We always want to get all the different classes with their roles, close together, even if their mechanics are different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely there, but we don't have any changes like going into M21 or anything. But that doesn't mean we couldn't, take a couple powers and change them, a month from now or something like that. So it's
Yeah.
it's those types of things are definitely always an option. It's just finding the right thing and making sure that we don't overshoot, because the worst thing is if we overshoot and then people like, this is great, but now it's overpowered, and then we bring it back, and now people are even more frustrated than they were originally.
Yeah.
So it's we just want to be careful with it. But yeah, we can always make some adjustments there.
Yeah, I would say just this is just my own personal suggestion. I don't know how any of it's set up or anything like that, but I think as far as the shielding go, the size of the shields and stuff is fine. But my suggestion would be if there's a way to have a separate magnitude for the healing and then versus the shielding. That way you still have the shields are still the same, but just the healing is a little bit better.
I mean, technically anything's possible, so I'd never say it's not possible. I don't have those power setups off the top of my head, so it depends on how they're set up. It might be a bit more difficult to separate them
Mm.
if they're closely linked, but it's never impossible to separate them.
So for this question, I don't like the example I gave where the whole team is taking a bunch of damage because of course it's going to be difficult to keep everyone healed in that situation. But the example I should have given is even when one person is taking a lot of damage consistently. Like sometimes with a tank, you can use Bond of Virtue, you can hope for Prayer of Opportunity to proc, but then you still have to wait the few seconds for Hand of Divinity to cast in order to get your big tab heal off. But other than that, you don't really have any major, I guess, divine, what's it called? Divine Touch, I think, the daily. But that only heals them once, and then you have no action points. So my whole thing was that it doesn't feel good to try and keep people alive as a paladin compared to the other healing classes. It's more difficult. The shields help, but at the end of the day, if you're not able to heal them, then the shield will go away, and then they will take even more damage than they were before, and then you're just slowly shielding them as their health gets lower and lower, and you're just... So, from the sounds of it, it doesn't sound like there are any changes for Paladin healing coming anytime soon. Maybe the discussion we had might cause them to discuss and maybe make some changes in the future, but I don't know. I hope so. I would love to see, like I suggested, the magnitude separated and then shielding magnitude stay the same and then healing magnitude go up by like, I don't know, 50 or 100 or something like that. That would be nice. But I guess we'll see. So this next question is the one that I think you'll like. And that's just because the first 5 words are please unleash your inner nerd. So,
Okay.
please unleash your inner nerd and tell me about something that you really enjoyed working on during this module and why. It doesn't have to be anything big, but just something that you were working on that you genuinely enjoyed.
Yeah, man. So it's kind of tricky for me because I was doing a lot of combat work and stuff like that while M21 work was going on. So the stuff that came out prior to that, but I did help with the reward setups and the adventure reward setups for the leveling, the overall outline of us going to these 20 levels and compressing the leveling and doing those tutorials. Just that concept was something I put forward, so I was glad to see it happen. Apologies to anyone who didn't want to see that happen. I guess you can blame me the most. But I definitely like that, and I didn't work on Bard, so I can't claim that one. Other people get the props for how good that is. So I definitely like that the leveling is better and people are actually getting geared out in a good way now. Like that's kind of, I guess that works because it's, you said in nerd. I'm sure that's boring to a lot of people, that kind of work, but it feels really good when you can get all that balance in place. You can crunch all those numbers, you can get in a place where it feels good. And so people now go through the leveling. It feels fast, fun, interesting, like you're always gaining and you're learning, and then you come out of it with a good item level to get into endgame, which is definitely not where the game was before. So I'm very happy with that and proud of that. And I hope that both new players coming in and people trying out Bard enjoy that as well. And I think originally, from early times we were working on Bard, it wasn't actually going to come out at the same time as work like this. So I'm sure some people think that we, from the beginning, intentionally linked those up. We didn't. We, as stuff was going on, it worked out that way, which I think is great because now you make a Bard, you have a new leveling experience. So
Yeah.
that that nerdy spreadsheet kind of stuff is definitely what I'm proud of.
I will say I do like the rewards for the as far as the adventures go, because you get a lot of stuff that you wouldn't have had before, like that big the improved bag of holding, the epic mounts and companion and stuff. The only thing that I feel is missing, maybe you can shed some light on this, is companion equipment. I don't know if anything has changed recently about that, but whenever I had leveled all the bards that I've leveled, I always had a lack of companion equipment. I didn't feel like that was really introduced at all. Is that something that we're just supposed to get from the one of the random skirmishes, or is there some other place that we were supposed to be introduced to that?
Did you get none or just not a lot? Because
None.
I thought, so I have to look into that. I thought, because I know we had talked about it, I thought we had a point where you got a piece of companion equipment. So if we didn't, that's something we can definitely look to improve. But it was never a plan that you'd have like all the companion equipment slots set up.
Right, of
Like
course.
it, but getting one would be good. If that's not there, that'd be a good thing for us. But then from there, yeah, it was more that you start earning it from skirmishes, going to, end game zones where you can get that kind of stuff, earning it there, and giving you more steps to take now that you're at end game. But I agree that if you're not getting any, it would be nice to get one piece in
Yeah,
there
I
from at
remember
least.
initially in early access, whenever you would complete Neverdeath, I think it was, you got 3 epic pieces of companion equipment, which was a lot, and but it was nice. But then the rewards changed, and there's no longer any companion equipment, so that would be something nice to have people introduced to, so that they're not wandering around like, where do I get this? Because that will be a question that people will ask for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good thing for us to look into.
Now, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question, but are there any plans to address the huge Zen exchange backlog? Because I've been told that the wait is like 5 or 6 months now. I don't know how reliable that information is, but it has been increasing, and people are kind of frustrated about it.
For sure. We've been trying some stuff, and we've tried some stuff in the past. We've been able to make some dents, but the I guess the short of it is that we need more AD syncs that players need to use themselves, if that makes sense. Because the more that each individual player has an AD sync, then the more that there's people looking for AD and also fewer people putting AD up on the exchange. And our game definitely gives out way more AD than you use outside of the auction house, which is really
Hmm.
just moving it around. So one of the things we've been doing is we've been trying out more low key is that we have the Wondrous Bazaar where we've been putting in limited time Zen items items that are normally for Zen. Like we had
Oh,
a
like
42
the
slot bag.
yeah, the bag. I bought that.
Yeah, a bunch of people did, which was great. And I think we did a Cold Ward recently, if I
Yes.
remember correctly.
Yep.
And so we've been trying out stuff like that to see how that works. And they are pulling out some AD, but not enough to shrink the exchange. And so we're going to be trying more of those. We're going to be trying some more unique items in the Wondrous Bazaar, and we're going to be looking at other ways to, have stuff people can basically use AD on for themselves to get better things or to upgrade things or improve things, so that there is more use for AD, which will then make the Zax work better. But it actually has been something I've been looking at my since I've been on the team.
Hmm.
And yes, it has grown over time. We tried stuff in the past, like where we did the auction for Alphonse Knox, and to see if people how that kind of auction system would go and what we'd pull out. And we tried raising the cap in the past, which helped a little bit and for a little while. But we keep trying different things. The main thing is we don't want to do anything suddenly drastic where all of a sudden people are like, oh, went from we spend a little AD here and there to there's all this stuff in the game that requires, like a million AD, because then
Yeah.
people are going to be frustrated in the other direction. So we have some different plans that we're trying and we're seeing how they work out and continue to evolve them. But yeah, it's the backlog is big enough that it's going to be a good chunk of work to start bringing that down. But it is a focus.
Okay. My one suggestion that I came up with in about the past 10 seconds is unique limited time transmute items in the Wondrous Bazaar.
I mean, sure. The question is, how much would you be willing to pay, right? Because for it to for us to pull enough AD out to pull down the billions of
A million
backlog, right?
AD.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. If we put a transmute up that was pretty cool, would people pay 1 million for it, or would
I
people say
would.
that's outrageous? So, yeah, it's definitely something we can explore.
All right. I'm glad to hear it's something that's been a focus because it kind of seems like we haven't heard too much about it. So people are kind of thinking like, oh, they don't care because we haven't heard any information about it, which I know is not necessarily the case for most things. But, it's good to hear a little bit about what's been going on and the things that have been tried and that people may not have realized.
Yeah. Yeah, because of how we rolled out, um, and this is more on me than anyone else. The Wondrous Bazaar items were like, well, let's start trying this out. So we didn't have smart ads in game to drive people. We kind of required people to learn from out of game or word of mouth, and so that kind of stuff always makes it harder for everyone to know it's there.
Yeah.
But we were kind of doing a slow start to see how the reception was, and it was pretty good for especially for that lesser communication. So we'll probably start adding more of that, and we'll probably start making it more of I can say what my ultimate goal is, but this may be a ways off, so I don't want people to be like, why isn't that here yet? But my
Yeah.
ultimate goal would be to have a different unique item in the Wondrous Bazaar every week. And so we're rotating through a bunch of different stuff. Some of it's, standard Zen items, but now for AD, and then other stuff is unique items. And we just every week is something different so people know to look there. And then hopefully we can find a good balance there where that's a key point that is helping the Zax exchange.
That would be pretty cool to have something new to look forward to every week. I know there's been times where I've gone without even capping my AD each day because I don't have anything that I want to spend on. So if I knew that there was going to be something new in the Wondrous Bazaar that I could spend my AD on each week, I would be more inclined to participate in the random queues each day and continuously earn AD because I would have stuff to buy.
See, now you just said you're going to add more AD to the economy and make it worse. But
Only a
yes, no,
little.
yes, the goal is to get everyone interested in that if we can pull that off and achieve it, and so that people are spending regularly, they're excited to see what comes next week, all that stuff. So hopefully we can get there, and it does make a big difference.
I hope so too, because that sounds cool. One thing that I would like to clarify with this question is whenever Jared was saying that the game gives out more AD than people use, he was saying that in reference to the places that we spend that AD. So the majority of our AD we spend on the auction house, and I think we can all agree on that, and that's kind of what he was getting at. It wasn't like he was saying, oh, the game leaves out way more ID than people know what to do with. We always have things to buy and stuff we need to upgrade stuff and things like that. So it was just in reference to the places where we spend that AD. I know some people might be confused by that, so I just wanted to clarify. But his ultimate goal of having a new unique item in the Wondrous Bazaar every week is something that I am really excited to hopefully see in the future. I've really liked the couple times that they've put things in the Wondrous Bazaar so far. Would love to see some unique transmutes in there specifically, but hopefully we get to see more of that stuff in the Wondrous Bazaar soon. So this question is about the content that's being removed in Mod 21, like the leveling zones and stuff. So I saw a few concerns that, oh, in the future, they're just gonna recycle the old zones and rebrand it as a new mod instead of having any brand new content. So, just for those people, do you have any insight about that? Like what the overall goal is with removing the content and possibly having it again in the future?
So I trying to figure out the rest of it. I don't know that that's necessarily a fair thing because people would say like, but you just released Sharndar, but we did all new zones. Like it was all new stuff. We didn't take the old zones, turn them off, and turn them back on, right? We made all new stuff. It just happened to be in the same place. But
Yeah.
I suspect that's where the concern's coming from. But no,
Yeah, partly.
there's no plans to take one of those leveling zones and basically up the item level, stick some new rewards in, and go, hey, here's mod 23, have fun, right? Like that's not our goal. The reason we took it out was that we wanted a better leveling experience. Like we actually have a lot of people, as we call it, churn out during leveling, which is where they hit certain points in the leveling and they get discouraged and they just stop playing.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't a lot of by having that kind of, you can go to all these different zones. There's not a straight flow. It's this long, like that was all part of the challenge. And so to compress that down, we had to take out some zones. Like otherwise, each zone would be like, there's 2 quests, go to the next zone, and that wouldn't feel good either.
Yeah.
But anytime we pull something out, it does give us an option of, hey, maybe we want to do an event, or maybe we want to have a quest where you go off to an instance version of that map, so you get to see something else. So, like an event takes place there, and so it gets turned on for a period. But we wouldn't use it as, here is this zone just re-released with new critters, and we call it a module. So people shouldn't worry about that.
Okay. I think what I would like to see the most from them is, like you said, events where you go back there for a limited time for whatever reason. Because people do like the old zones, and people, of course, understandably are sad that it's being removed. And being able to go back there for any reason would probably make those people happy.
And hopefully doing that kind of stuff would actually give people more access to it, because as much as people like the zones, once you're leveled, there's not really any reason to go there. Like you could go
Yeah.
there just to enjoy it, but you're not going to get good rewards. You're just going to, crush everything. It's not going to be that exciting. So if we can reuse those as an event where, there are good rewards and it's actually, exciting to fight through, I think that will, for the zones people like, will actually make it better for them, because they'll get to have real reasons to play there.
Yeah, the only reason I ever went back to the older zones after I've leveled was to take screenshots for thumbnails. So.
Yeah.
So I think I heard this somewhere, don't remember who or where, but I believe there were originally plans to do something with strongholds this past year, but then COVID happened and then it was moved out of the way in favor of other more important stuff. So is that something, is any, how do I want to word this?
Like, I know what you're getting at. If
Is there any stronghold related changes that we can look forward to seeing in the next couple mods or in the next year?
um in this calendar year, probably not. Next year, there's definitely potential. So it was on the schedule. It
Mm,
was originally targeted for like the end of this year, and then yeah, plans changed. It came off. Plans changed again because people even internally really want to do it. So we put it back on to see if we could get it, and then after looking at a bunch of resources and other stuff, we pulled it back out. And I, just because of your wording, I want to make sure to say it's not that the other stuff is necessarily more important, because we think getting this, updated is actually pretty important.
yeah.
It's the pure amount of work involved in it, because the the underneath structure of it is not good. It was built at a time where they didn't have the right resources to put towards it, but they wanted that structure, and so they just kind of, I don't want to say hacked it together, but they were creative in how they built it. And so the
Mm,
underlying structure is very tough to work with. It makes upgrading and adding new things to it extremely difficult. And so the thing is, we want to rebuild that structure in a much better way, with the idea of being able to upgrade and do all this stuff and expand strongholds over time. And that by itself is a pretty big undertaking, which is why we need to make sure we have a good amount of resources to put together, so we don't make the same mistakes the second time. This time around, we actually make it very robust. And that's what we want to do, so that we can do an awful lot with strongholds. Um, but yeah, there's a big desire to get to it on the team, and there is obviously a big desire from a lot of players to get to it. So it is something that we keep trying to see when can we dedicate time to that.
yeah, because
And
guilds are kind of a really, I want to say, fundamental part of the game because you're grouping with people in your guild to run content with, work on upgrading the stronghold together. It's basically a place to be social with people, and it's people kind of want to see that upgraded just because it's been a really long time and people are like, oh, it's due for an upgrade because of how old the stuff is. But would you say then that it would be as big of an undertaking or bigger than like reworking some of the other core systems of the game? Like, what's a good example? Like Mod 16, for example, how there was all those giant changes with everything.
well, Mod 16 is tricky because it was so many different systems.
Yeah.
But it it has the potential to be bigger than, for example, just to pull out one of the systems, when we redid the classes, their powers, and their feats. It has the potential to be as big or bigger than that, which was very big. And that, but that's we really want to build the whole thing and do all this stuff with it. What could happen is we pare that down some and go, listen, we really want to do this update. We might just have to pare back our ambitions some and do a smaller thing where we still do the structure, but we, start off with something, less resource intensive to do and then build on top of it over time, like we've done with some other things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it as a complete picture is very big. It's a very big undertaking.
I think that would probably be good for people to know because people are kind of thinking like, oh, it's not that much work, but they just don't.
Yeah,
Most 99% of people just don't know anything about what goes on behind the scenes, so they just kind of think that everything's just thrown together easily.
yeah, that's kind of the life of video game design is people outside looking in always think, oh, wouldn't it be as simple as this or just changing that? And sometimes yes, but a lot of other times no. And so we certainly get the frustration. And yeah, I think it's important to communicate out just how big of an undertaking that is, but also one that we do genuinely care about and talk about a lot. So it chances are very good that we'll get around to it. It just might not be immediate.
Okie dokie. Speaking of that, kind of, uh, do you know if there's going to be a new roadmap released anytime soon?
I don't, because that's generally more of, I think, the EP call if we do that. Um, but I mean, personally, I don't see any concerns in doing it outside of, as you see, sometimes when you
Sometimes
do a
stuff
roadmap
doesn't
that
happen.
far, yeah, you put on strongholds and then you pull it off and everyone's, where'd strongholds go? But as
Yeah.
long as we're communicating that stuff and being open that stuff will change and why it changed, I think they're fine. But yeah, I personally can't say if there will or won't. That's a different call than I would be able to make.
Okay, I hope there is. And like you said, as long as the communication is there and not just like here's a roadmap and then 3 months later here's the new roadmap missing some of the stuff that you were excited about. As long as it's kind of explained the process a little bit and why things are put on there or removed from there, I think it would be fine and something that players would benefit from knowing what's coming in the future.
Yeah. No, yeah, player, we definitely got some good amount of feedback from players liking the roadmap and liking that information. So we've talked about it sub internally. I just don't know if we're planning on doing it or not.
I actually only have one more question in the main category that's kind of about Neverwinter. And it's only something that I was brought to my attention today, actually. And that is about mount colors, which would have made sense to ask you this question at the very beginning with the Mythic insignias. But anyways,
I know I teed
um
you up.
so collars right now, they give more item level than combined rating. So whenever you equip them, it increases your item level, but then the actual percentages of your stats go down. And then that makes you further away from the cap than you were without them. So people are kind of like, well, why would I even want them to begin with? Because the bonuses on them, people would rather have their stats being capped, I guess, than having the bonuses that come along with them. So is that something that is intentional, having the different combined rating and item level, or is that something that's going to be changed?
Um, so just to make sure that nothing is misconstrued, I'll probably be slightly pedantic with the with the terms on this one, but everything gives less combined rating than item level. Like if everything gives combined rating and other stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your stats change. The collars people see most concerned with are the utility collars that give like gold, XP, that kind of stuff, because now you have it's if you have a collar that's giving combined rating and giving say like power or crit or something, you are seeing overall your stats go up the amount of the item level. Like some stats might go down, but the other ones are going up just like every other piece of equipment.
Yeah.
But the ones that give a gold bonus, all that other kind of stuff, now you have item level going to something that isn't main stat, so they're seeing overall a reduction in stats. So it is intentional. It's something we've discussed. There's pros and cons to changing those specific collars. We've talked about it, we've thought about it, we've debated it. And so basically the two sides is the way it works now, all the collars have the same item level per rank. People can understand that. Um, and the amount that you lose from like those gold bonuses and stuff for pretty much everyone isn't going to change how successful you are in a dungeon or a zone. And that's not to dismiss that I fully understand and accept, because I'm a completionist and min-maxer and a lot of stuff myself, that doesn't mean it necessarily feels good. But there's also people that they want item level to get access to stuff, and so they may not mind that little bit of stat loss because they get that extra item level that might get them in a dungeon, it might get them to a zone, and so that gives them that. And if we change it now, people will see their item level drop, and that always makes some people just start freaking out a bit of, hey, my item level went down when this update happened.
Yeah.
What's going on? And if someone's at the cusp of something, they might actually lose access to something. So there is that concern of changing it. And there's the concern of there might be some confusion of, why does this caller give this much item level, but this other caller at the same rank doesn't. But that being said, it isn't that we can't make that difference. We can, and we've thought about it, we've talked about it, and it's just we haven't yet because we're not sure that it's the right move, and that it might basically just move complaints from one section of the player base and how they view stuff to another section of the player base and how they view stuff, and that there isn't a perfect solution here that will just necessarily make everyone happy. But it is a conversation I am fully willing to have with with players from all sorts weighing in, and that is a change that can be made. So I think it's worth there being some discussions around it to see if we want to make that change and have that little bit of disruption when we do.
Okay, another question that I just thought of that's related to that is, um, I do know that combined rating is always less than the item level, but when you look at mount callers, I believe it's always half, if I'm not mistaken. 50%, like 300 combined rating, 600 item level. But then whenever you look at the actual gear pieces, the difference is smaller. So, for example, I'm just looking at this random character on the test account that was given to me. The chest plate item level is 1500, and then the combined rating is 1350, and that's a much smaller difference. So why is that?
So not all the sources in the game have the same split. For the main gear, we want it to be mostly combined rating because, especially for newer players, for more casual players, that's the easier stuff to understand, the easier stuff to focus on. And so you equip your gear, you get higher item levels. Overall, your stats pretty much stay relatively the same, and you're just getting higher item levels, so higher damage, higher hit points, and accessing more stuff. But not all categories have the same breakdown. So like companion powers and mount powers can have a different breakdown. Insignias can have a different breakdown. I don't have all of them in front of me, but when we were doing this, we actually called out like internally for our docs like the different categories, and part of that was to make sure that we weren't heavy-handed with combined rating everywhere, because there was a lot of players who were concerned that doing the combined rating meant that they couldn't min-max as good, they couldn't dump stats to favor other stats, and they didn't have as much control. So we wanted to make sure there were categories where players had more control, so that there was more item level going to specific stats instead of combined rating. So kind of each area that you can equip on your character has different ratios.
I can't say I really paid too much attention to that before because I don't really min-max too much. I try to get close, but then after that I'm not really working too hard to have the max of everything. But that is pretty interesting, and I never thought of it like that before. So thank you.
And I'm kind of glad with what you just said, because one of the goals of this was also that for a person who didn't want to focus on min-maxing, the system was in a place that if you were just getting better gear, you should pretty much be fine for what you're doing. And
Mm-hmm.
you should be like, if your item level is, consistent or higher than the content you're doing, regardless basically of what you have equipped, you'll be okay. But then those that really want to customize have more flexibility. And that was all the conversation going into that combat rework. And so, for me, having done pretty much most of that work, that feels good to hear you say that, because obviously you're playing the game and you're having fun and you don't have to worry about that. You can still do it, but the people who want to do have that avenue as well.
Yeah. Okay, that is actually all the serious questions I have. Well, serious by like in the Neverwinter category specifically. So I do have a
Sure.
few kind of more general questions about you and your work. If I don't know how much time we have left. Julia.
You have 10 minutes.
Okay. So, do you remember the very first project that you worked on?
or Neverwinter or in my game development career?
For Neverwinter.
I can't say for sure it was the exact first thing, but one of the first things that I'll basically call it a few of the first things I did was, besides fix bugs, because when you show up to a team and you're new and you're learning, one of the good things is that you get bugs and that helps you.
Yeah.
But outside of that was taking the time a campfire takes to get rid of an injury from 3 minutes down to 30 seconds. That was something I asked to do when I got on the team because I was like, can we please change this? I did a section of the critters for Chult, the Batiri specifically. So sorry for anyone that finds those annoying. Setting up their powers and that kind of stuff. And then the first big thing I did was the initial refinement change to go off of where we created refinement powder, and you didn't have to use theme matching and all that kind of stuff anymore. That was my first big project.
So it was you that I was upset with at the time.
Oh, then yes, I was.
Yeah, at the time I was not happy with that, but now I'm okay with it. So I'm not mad at you anymore.
I don't want to waste too much of your time, but out of curiosity, what was the thing that made you upset the most?
It was mainly because I felt like the game was starting to remove a lot of the complexity that I really enjoyed. So,
Okay.
for example, when I was upgrading things, I liked having to get the right stuff to upgrade the things instead of having one general resource that I could use to upgrade everything. And that was kind of the main thing because I liked having at the time I was not in game, I don't think, or at least I was probably middle. And so I was upgrading stuff all the time. And that was something that I was focused on a lot. And I liked having to, search around, buy the different regents and especially the, what was it? The artifact feeding. That was something that was really cool to me.
Oh,
That I never
sure. Yeah,
fully
yeah.
understood, but I thought it was really cool.
Okay. Yeah. I always, as much as players may not think it, I do like getting that kind of feedback so I can, make sure I'm understanding where different players are coming from.
So, this is kind of more of a general question. How is it decided which content gets developed next? Like, I think I know in terms of like a general module idea or concept, you're given that by wizards, I think. But then,
No,
no?
actually, no.
Oh,
Um, so we
educate me.
do, so we do try to coordinate with wizards, like when they say like, here's some upcoming modules and some stuff we're working on. Does that stuff work? Like, we get that info and then we say, oh yeah, we'd like to tie into that too.
Mm-hmm.
But there is no, like, WotC doesn't come down and say like, you must do this module next. Like they're actually really good about letting us explore the Dungeons and Dragons world, and like we pitch stuff to them like, hey, can we do this crazy thing? And a lot of times they're like, yeah, like we think that'll work. Every once in a while, like, here's really crazy, and they're like, yeah, I don't think we want that for our world. But so what we do is, it's a lot of meetings. It's a group of people sitting together exploring what type of stuff we want first of all, right? So is the next module focused around a traditional campaign zone, adventure zone, and dungeon, all that, or is it a time where we need to tackle something like M21 where we need to fix up the leveling, or is it where we're going to try, do we want to try some new systems? Do we want to try some new avenues? Is there new features we want to do, like mounts to Mythic? So we kind of run down all that. And then for actual zones, we look at, what places do we want to go? What modules does WotC have coming out? Do we want to tie into those? Like, Ravenloft, for example, they didn't have anything going on. I think with Ravenloft at the time, did they? I forget. But I think we approached them and said like, hey, we really want to do Ravenloft because we like it so much. And, they were fine with it and stuff. So sometimes it's just that. Sometimes it's, man, wouldn't it be great to go to Ravenloft? And other times it's, they have a cool new module coming out with some interesting stuff and we'd like to tie in. And, other times it's just someone being like, hey, there's a part of D&D world that I always liked. Can we go there and we'll discuss it? So it's really a creative process of a bunch of people discussing ideas, business goals, goals for players, goals for gameplay, and then figuring out what we think will work best.
So it's a lot more open-ended than most people really think it is. Because I think a lot of people have the impression that Wizards is like, you must do this, and then you just kind of have to work with whatever you have to make that happen.
No, they're actually a very good people to work with. They that, well, I guess I shouldn't say they like because I don't know for sure, but they are very open to us exploring stuff and sometimes being like, hey, could we do this? And I wish I had a specific example off the top of my head, but I remember there's been a couple things that we've pitched to them and done that they actually said like, oh, we might like to use that in our stuff, right? And make kind of a tie-in. And so they are actually very collaborative and are open to a lot of creativity. Their main thing is just like, don't start changing the lore and rules of our
Yeah.
world that we've crafted by an extreme amount or anything. But other than that, they're pretty great to work with.
That is pretty cool, actually. Good to know. So, this question is something that I had always been curious about, and the entire time that Jared was talking to me, I was just thinking to myself, like, man, I would love to sit in on some of those meetings, but I didn't say that out loud because I didn't want it to be taken the wrong way. Obviously, I will never be able to sit in on those meetings. There's a bunch of reasons why, legal reasons, NDA reasons, probably some more reasons that I don't know, but I didn't want it to be misconstrued that I was trying to be like, hey, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, I would like to sit in on that meeting, because I know that that's not something that can happen, and it's not something that I should ever push for, and I will never push for. But I just think that it would be a really eye-opening and educational experience, especially since I am interested in game design and I like learning more about the games that I like, especially the behind the scenes kind of stuff. So I find all that really interesting, which is why I initially asked this question. But I also think knowing how open-ended it actually is something that might be beneficial for people to know, because now we have the potential to be like, hey, and suggest module ideas and know that they may actually be acknowledged, instead of us thinking like, well, we can't suggest it because Wizards decides or Perfect World decides, when in reality that's not the case. So, I don't know how much of the community's comments you see personally, like on the forums, videos, Reddit, and stuff, and all that. But there's a lot of negativity, as you know. So, how do you personally cope with the vast amount of hate towards yourself and the other developers? Like, people saying devs are lazy, they never listen to the players, they don't know what they're doing, they never play the game, and so on.
Yeah, it's tough. Like, so by the time I got to Neverwinter, I already had 10 years in the industry, but it's the same everywhere. It's the same on every project. There's just negativity and there's positivity. I think you learn to kind of, look for the negativity that is about, actual stuff that's like, hey, this thing is too grindy, or hey, this feature isn't working out right, and seeing what you can do. But the other comments where it's like, yeah, you guys are lazy, or you guys are trying to kill the game, or that kind of stuff, it's, I think you read it, but you just kind of go on to the next stuff looking for the real information out there. And it's a thing where you have to have that thicker skin. You can't take that personally. It's someone that's angry about something. It might be something in the game. It might be a change that, was actually good for the game and other people like, but they don't. It might not even be something related to the game. And that's, it's the internet. It's an easy way to get that anger out there. So I think in this industry, you have to be okay knowing that's going to happen, and basically just understanding it's human nature, and there's the positive and there's the negative. And there are people that like your stuff, there are people that talk about the good work that you've done, and just accept that it's on both sides.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that with my own experiences. I've had my fair share of awful interactions in my comments and stuff, seeing things people say about me. But you are right, and obviously you're right, but it's just, you just kind of tune out the misdirected anger, because a lot of times people are angry, but they're just not focusing their upsetness in the right way, or they maybe don't know how to form it the right way to make it actually something meaningful. I don't know if that's mean to say, but
I think it's accurate, right? Because there's constructive criticism where someone comes out and says, hey, this isn't working right, or hey, these insignias feel too grindy. Are you going to do something about it? Or are you going to make us, deal with this? And that's very valuable and it's valid. It's like, people should have constructive criticism. But yeah, if someone just goes, "You suck and I hate you," it's like, all right, it's not like I can do anything about that. So
Yeah.
there's nothing actionable. So as a player, if you want something to change, you should always try the constructive method because that tends to work out better. But yeah, some people just get angry. It's just the way it is.
Yep. I had a nickname for a while that I actually think is kind of funny. I think Julia might know this, but whenever I've had the first dev stream I ever did with Lasser 2 years ago, I gained the nickname Shilvery.
Interesting. I don't think I get it.
Here, well, she was shilling for the company. I'm guessing is what the
Oh,
accusations
okay.
were.
Nice.
I
Yeah,
was gonna
that's
go with artist extraordinaire because you and Lasser had the art competition, but yeah,
I mean,
I'm
I'll at least give someone credit that that's clever.
yeah.
But yeah,
I
I mean,
thought it
it's
was
not.
amusing.
But yeah, there's always that too, and I feel bad for people. Anyone, if someone's really angry and determined that they think this is terrible and it must fail because the devs are awful, then any player that comes out and says anything positive or constructive or just isn't negative enough, they're gonna go after them too, and that's extra unfortunate because I
Yep.
think as developers we accept it, we know that that's part of it. As much as life probably shouldn't be that way, but we're like that's what it is. But when it starts hitting people in your community, that's when it bothers you more. So
Hmm.
that's always unfortunate.
Yep, I see that all the time, but it doesn't really bother me anymore. Very rarely do I actually get upset about anything anymore, but it was difficult in the beginning for sure.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember some of my first stuff in the industry where you're like, "Oh man, like that person's really angry. Like, what did I do?" Like, oh, and so yeah, it's always surprising at first, but you adapt.
I think I am about out of time, but I have one last silly question kind of for you. It will take like 5 seconds.
Sure.
You're
Um,
good.
okay, this might be really weird and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but what's your middle name? There's a reason for this, by the way.
Ryan.
Darn it. Okay. So the reason for that is because yesterday, I realized that your entire name consists of companies, and I had to know what your middle name was to see if it was also a
There
company.
there are they're not big companies, but there are a couple places called like Ryan's. I think there was like a restaurant at one point where I was living was Ryan. The best part is I did see a mall that had both a Jared's Galleria and a Sears store in it, and I was like, nice, that's pretty good. Yeah,
Yeah, the mall near me had both of them at one point. But
nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
how does it feel being named after a bunch of companies?
The Jared one isn't so much because people don't think about those. Sears was pretty iconic. I mean, at this point they've more or less gone under, so I guess it's less of a
Yeah.
thing. But yeah, like people used to, give the jokes like, "Hey, where's Roebuck?" and that kind of stuff. And so, it is what it is. I didn't get any of the money with Sears. We had no connection to it. But
Yeah.
yeah, some people always found it a bit amusing and stuff. But no one's ever been like malicious. I don't know that you could, but no one's ever really been negative with it.
I just had to ask because every time before this that I would hear your name said out loud, all I could think of is he went to Jared.
Yep. No, yeah, that slogan that was airing for a long time, and people were mentioning that. I was like, come on.
I just
That's
want to say that we all go to Jared a lot, and poor Jared just I think wants to
I
hide
was
and
just
run
gonna
from us
say
sometimes.
that. I was gonna say that's what people say every time they come to you to figure something out, and then someone's like, "Oh, where did you get that? Where'd you hear that?" And then it's like, "I went to Jared."
Well, I mean, you can certainly for your videos title it that. That's fine.
Okay, I'll consider it. I don't know if it would do very well though because
I don't think it would. I don't think it
no.
would help you at all, actually. So,
I think
Oh, no.
it'll amuse me when I tell Mally, and Mally and I will totally abuse that too. So we are out of time. I mean, there was nothing else coming after, so I should go a couple minutes longer. I'm sorry we didn't get to the bard thing, but I look forward to your videos if you're gonna try to play Happy Birthday in your
I will
videos.
try. Yes, I actually enjoyed this a lot. I learned a decent amount more than I was expecting, and it's always nice to get to talk to any dev really about their work, and especially because I have a specific interest in learning about game design and stuff. So I find these kind of discussions and topics really interesting. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it a lot. Learned a lot, and
oh,
I enjoyed
thank you.
myself.
They were great questions. I enjoyed it as well.
Okay, so as promised, I am going to try to play the Happy Birthday song. It's been several days now since I practiced it, and I only practiced it for one day, the day before the interview that I had. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, I already messed up. Hold on. No, I almost had it. Okay, I can play the whole thing now, I remember. I'll just give you a full playthrough so that it's not as awful to listen to. Yay, I did it! It's actually not as easy as you would think. Makes use of the octaves or half steps or whatever they're called. And it's not my birthday, but I'm sure it's somebody's birthday, and happy birthday to whose ever birthday it is. That being said, I do just want to give one final thank you to Jared and Julia as well for their time. You didn't hear Julia very much, but she was there the entire time, just in case we needed anything. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope that there can be more opportunities like that in the future. It was a press-style event. I was invited alongside a bunch of journalists and stuff, which was pretty cool, but I was definitely way out of my element and don't know anything about journalism, and so it was just a normal interview/conversation for me. But in the future, hopefully more content creators can be invited. I think that would be really cool. This time around we had someone who primarily streams, someone who primarily has articles and written guides and stuff, and then myself who primarily does videos. So it was kind of a spectrum of different content creator types. And the other two people involved were Dead Mono and Analia, and I will have both of their stuffs linked in the description or the pinned comment below so you can check theirs out. They had different questions than me. I don't know what their questions were because we never shared them with each other, but we all approached it from a different perspective, and as a result, there is different information in all of our stuff. So please give theirs a read or a listen or a watch or whatever it is. I don't know at this moment in time. I will find out. If you are still here, congratulations. Thank you for watching or listening or whatever. I hope you found one of the giveaway codes. If you forgot about them and you're here, there was one for each platform. I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's a secret, but it's some pretty valuable stuff. And there will be more giveaway codes hidden in videos in the future, so keep an eye out for those because I probably won't announce them next time. It'll be even more of a secret. Thank you guys so much for being here and allowing me to gain these opportunities that I have. It means a lot to me. I appreciate every single one of you. Now I'm gonna go back to preparing some things for the Bard's release on the live servers, so okay, bye.